one of the great magicians of the last century, Ricky Jay, magician, master of close-up magic, card tricks, illusions. You've seen him in movies, even if you don't know the name. He wrote that one of the tenets of magic, that sort of magic he practiced, is that the spectators cannot perceive correctly the miraculous effects that they've witnessed. That is, the thing they think they've seen, the cause and effect that they believe they've just witnessed, is not actually the thing that happened. He says the use of psychology is one of the principal techniques of the conjurer. He talked like that all the time, especially in the practice of misdirection, in which a spectator's attention is directed to a specific point dictated by the performer. So the snap of the fingers draws your attention one way while the coin gets palmed in the other direction. Regardless of the trick, by controlling your focus, the magician makes it impossible for you to pay attention to the right thing at the right time. We are good at playing that same trick on ourselves, incidentally. If you've ever worked out and then justified having ice cream because you worked out, you know what I mean. You exercise and burn 300 calories and then eat 800 calories of ice cream because you worked out. I'm in a bulk phase. It makes sense in your head, though, right? Because it takes the form of something that's reasonable. It's actually, though, a kind of misdirection that is rationalizing the irrational. It's constructing this false reason why some behavior makes sense, pulling your attention away from what's really happening. This is not actually a story about magic shows or dessert habits. Instead, I want to suggest that in public life, from politicians and thought leaders and pundits and social media shares, we are drenched by this steady downpour of misdirection in the shape, in the clothing of well-reasoned arguments, or at least reasonable-sounding arguments. The first time I noticed this happening, the first time I saw this pattern unfolding, the first time I looked, rather, in the right place at the right time during the magic trick, was watching a documentary years and years ago interviewing people after the end of apartheid in South Africa. And the interview I'm thinking of is with a former South African paramilitary commander sitting at his dining room table in the late morning, speaking to the interviewer's camera about his former life. He's a white man in his early 60s, overweight, short gray hair, glasses, polo shirt, and he speaks earnestly, plainly, not trying to persuade, but speaking with conviction, with clarity. He says, "We were at war. We believed that if the black South Africans were organized, they would rise up. They were trying to get weapons, they would have used them on us. I had to do what I did to keep the country from descending into chaos. And if we didn't get them, they'd be shooting at us a few years later. So we found suspects, we took care of them. I did what I had to do to keep our country together." Which sounds reasonable if you don't know what he's actually talking about. Because what his unit did was find and kill 14 and 15-year-olds who had committed no crime, but who might at some point in the future be likely to fight against the apartheid government, and that future possibility justified their murder. And he didn't talk about those killings as acts of passion or hatred. He's explaining the reasons that he had to do what he did. These straightforward, pragmatic, hard-headed, maybe, reasons preventing future crimes, creating a deterrent to dissuade others from following that path. And this, I think, this is the real horror of what this commander had to say, that reasonable, well-meaning people could be persuaded into a program of reasonable, well-meaning assassination or genocide or ethnic cleansing, that those weren't the product of trickery, but of bright, reasonable people making bright, reasonable arguments about how to protect themselves. I was struck then by the ordinariness of it. The way he explained this, not like a villain in a movie cackling, but sitting at his dining room table on a sunny morning, making atrocity look like common sense necessity. And it's easy maybe to brush that off as obvious, or to pat ourselves on the back for our own moral superiority. But right here in this country, we are carrying out atrocity in plain sight, with the nation's attention misdirected by rationale and explanation. Our nation runs internment camps for immigrants where children and adults sleep on concrete floors without soap or toothpaste or recreation, in windowless buildings where the lights remain on 24 hours a day. We inter children and adults in conditions that violate the Geneva Convention for war prisoners. And to be clear, these are not prisons. The people inside of them have not been convicted of a crime, and the human beings inside them, not convicted of a crime, are held there indefinitely. There is another name for these, and the name for them is concentration camps. And I don't mean to use that term in a political sort of way. I mean to use it only in a descriptive way. This is the dictionary definition: a camp where persons are confined, usually without hearings, and typically under harsh conditions, often as a result of their membership in a group which the government has identified as dangerous or undesirable. But why? Why concentration camps for immigrants? Well, for straightforward, pragmatic, maybe a little hard-headed reasons. Here's what's given. Here's what you read plain as editorials and talking points. If security is tighter, fewer people will try to enter the country. If parents know they might be separated from their kids, fewer will try to enter the country. If asylum rules are angled against asylum seekers, if temporary protective status can be removed at will without notice, why would refugees try to come? The rationale, in other words, is to prevent future crimes and create a deterrent to persuade others from following that path. And those are the lines repeated by politicians and columnists and friends and family. And the thing is, they take the form, the shape, the clothing of a thoughtful, considered reason. But it's misdirection. By controlling the focus of your attention into those arguments, they make it impossible for you to pay attention to the right thing at the right time. And I don't here mean that they're misdirecting you from some grand plan, though maybe. I mean instead, misdirecting your attention away from the still small voice of conscience that every one of us has. The sleight of hand here is to get you disconnected from your moral sense. Whatever your opinion about immigration, when you hear the condition of these camps, there is part of you, that still small voice within you, which says this is clearly absurd and inhumane. Whatever your politics, this is no way to treat human beings. And this voice of conscience is what's silenced by the reasonable sounding explanations. We have to keep the country from descending into chaos. If we don't get them, they'll be shooting at us in a few years. We need to find suspects and take care of them. We need to do what we have to do to keep our country together and protect us. I don't usually preach with that level of sarcasm. Someone told me, yeah, but a little bit of sarcasm. But it's sharp. This moral disengagement. Moral disengagement is the name for how we convince ourselves that ethical standards don't apply in this situation. And it works just the way that sleight of hand magic does. It directs your attention from what's happening, the human reality of this. It directs your attention away from that to other things that draw you in, to the arguments, to the talking points. It reframes the behavior in a way that makes it acceptable without changing either the behavior or your moral standard. We're still good people. We still believe in being good to kids and welcoming refugees. Of course we do. Of course children shouldn't be separated from their parents. Everyone knows that. Of course that's what we believe as Americans. It's just that in this situation, that doesn't apply. Each of these strategies presents reasons, justifications, explanation, but more than that, it works as misdirection because it demands an answer back from you. It demands that you engage with that sort of reasoning on its own terms. There's a kid's book called Don't Let Pigeon Drive the Bus. Do you know this book? The plot is simple. It's actually, I just told you the plot already. Don't let pigeon drive the bus. The bus driver has stepped out for a moment and left you in charge with only one directive. Do not let the pigeon drive the bus. But as soon as the driver is gone, that's already happened on the title page, Pigeon steps in. Please, can I drive? Says Pigeon. I will be careful. My cousin Harry, says Pigeon, my cousin Harry drives a bus almost every day. This is a true story. Pigeon says, what if we do this? What if I just drive the bus to the corner and then back again? You'll see me the whole time. Pigeon says, this is just a bus. This is not rocket science. Anybody can drive a bus a little bit. I have dreams, says Pigeon. I have dreams. This is unfair. Every one of Pigeon's lines works just like that same stage magician, snapping fingers to control your attention. You know that it is absurd for a pigeon to drive a bus. But when Pigeon says, no, I'll be careful, and you reply to Pigeon saying, here's the thing, I hear you saying that you'll be careful, but there's actually no good evidence that pigeons can drive. I don't think there's good reasons to believe that you will be a careful driver. You've already fallen for the trick. If you've ever tried to reason with a 5-year-old hell-bent on French fries, you know there's nothing down the road of going back and forth in a give and take. What to pay attention to here? You could imagine a contemporary version of this story called Don't Let Pigeon Run Concentration Camps. The Chinese government runs concentration camps every day. Why can't I? Why don't you just let me run them till the emergency's over, right? What's the big deal? It's not like they're citizens. It's just a temporary detention. I want secure borders. Do you not? It's sharp, I think, to say it. But this is what's being said plainly, without the sarcastic intonation, every day. Directing your attention away from the simple, clear voice of conscience into an endless labyrinth of argumentation disconnected from the reality of human experience. And because we are reasonable people, because we are people who believe strongly, deeply in reason and tolerance and empathy, we're ready to debate and dialogue and discuss. When Pigeon says, just let me run these camps till the emergency is over, and you say, well, I disagree about what constitutes an emergency and whether that applies to your deployment of the National Guard, you've already fallen for the trick in some way, because Pigeon has 11 more reasons why your definition of emergency is wrong. And actually, the founder's original intent was precisely for this situation. And Pigeon has plenty of time to go through all of that with you. Not all debate is real debate. In reposted statements online, in carefully edited and curated video of so-called debate, there is a performance of give and take, which is actually about reinforcing what the watcher already believes on faith. One commentator writes, "This style of debate as performance has become incredibly popular because it feeds into our current political moments, hunger for easy victories and clear villains. People want to see their side destroying the opposition with facts and logic, setting up situations where you can't lose, and then claiming victory when your rigged game produces the expected results. This has become a template for political engagement across the spectrum. Real debate requires vulnerability. The possibility that you might be wrong, that you might need to change your mind." Pigeon is not actually trying to debate with you about driving the bus. Pigeon is not open to a give and take where they are educated about why pigeons should not drive buses. Pigeon has an unshakable belief that they should drive the bus, that they deserve to drive the bus. Pigeon has escaped from uncertainty. And whatever it takes to convince you, they're going to try it. Shortly after the liberation of Paris in the Second World War, the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre published an essay called Anti-Semite and the Jew, in which he describes anti-Semitism not as the actual hatred of actual Jews, but as a kind of fantasy attached to a fantastical idea of Jews that has almost nothing to do with the reality of actual Jewish people. The anti-Semite, says Sartre, and we could say this of some anti-immigrant voices, some anti-black voices, some anti-trans voices. The anti-Semite, he says, has escaped from uncertainty. They don't have to wrestle with the complexities, the contradictions of the real world. They don't have to learn anything new. They don't have to grow or change or reconcile themselves to not understanding the experience of another person. Because at the center, he says, anti-Semitism is not an argument, but a faith, an irrational, unexplainable belief which precedes any argument made to support it. The anti-Semite, like the white Christian nationalist movement, like the anti-queer movement, does not engage in good faith dialogue. He writes, "They know their remarks are frivolous and open to challenge, but they are amusing themselves. For it is their adversary who is obliged to use words responsibly, since he believes in words. And by giving ridiculous reasons, they discredit the seriousness of their interlocutors, their partners in the argument. They delight in acting in bad faith, since they seek not to persuade by sound argument, but to intimidate and disconcert. And if you press them too closely," he writes, 1944, "they will abruptly fall silent, loftily indicating by some phrase that the time for argument is past." If the anti-Semite is impervious to reason and to experience, it is not because his conviction is strong. Rather, his conviction is strong because he has chosen, first of all, to be impervious. This is the lens through which to notice the clips of triumphant takedowns that YouTube's algorithm is probably putting next to this video right now. It's not that all dialogue is in bad faith, but dialogue in bad faith misdirects, like Pigeon, like the South African military commander, like the justifications for concentration camps. Its sleight of hand is moral disengagement, sending your attention away from conscience, shifting you away from human and humane reality. And hear me carefully, it's not that dialogue and debate and discussion are useless. Hold the nuance. It's that dialogue in good faith is different in kind than dialogue in bad faith. And it takes work to discern which is at play and how to respond. My suggestion is that where reason sometimes can be tricked and misdirected, compassion and conscience are surer guides. And it's heavy to say all of this. There's a weight in the room to it. But the work that we do here of sitting with the most difficult things, not just this topically, but everything behind every one of those stones that you place, the work that we do here of celebration, of sharing joy and sorrow, bring your pain and bring your sorrow, the choir sang today. Bring your hopes and your fears, and we will wrap our loving arms around you. These are practices that keep us connected to compassion, that help us to remember the essential humanity of all people. This is not about escape from the world. We'll just joy ourselves into feeling numb. This is not navel gazing. This is preparation. And it's not just, the feeling of worship, words, melody, silence. The way that we encounter each other, that we work to encounter each other over coffee and committee meetings. The way that we practice seeing each other and listening each other into speech, of saying, "How are you?" and actually genuinely meaning it. That's the work of finding love at the center of living, of reconnecting, of finding that music that we're listening for. The rock unswayed by the tempest of the world, the endless song which sings through all creation. These are the words that we'll sing together in just a moment. This is our work, not to carry this as a weight and a burden, but as a reminder that at the center of living, we're trying to follow this thread of love through the labyrinth of the world and not lose it, not get distracted, but to pay attention today and every day. Amen.